Nathan Blackfeather thought the inheritance was nothing more than a curse, a forgotten lake in the mountains, wrapped in fog and superstition. But when his German shepherd, Coda, unearthed a rusted box half buried in the mud, the past came alive. Inside were journals whispering of blood, betrayal, and a fortune in gold hidden since the Civil War. What began as a legacy soon turned into a battle for survival against shadows that would kill to keep their secrets buried. This is a story of mystery, faith, and the courage to face darkness with hope. Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from. Drop your country in the comments so we can see how far this story of courage travels. The town of Charleston, West Virginia, was wrapped in the kind of winter cold that gnawed at bones and made even the strongest men hunch their shoulders as if bracing against invisible blows. The sky hung low, a bruised gray blanket pressing down upon the streets where old brick buildings stood stubbornly against the passage of time. Slush coated the sidewalks, and every gust of wind carried with it the metallic scent of coal dust, a reminder that this was a land built on sweat, struggle, and forgotten promises. It was here, in a cramped apartment at the edge of the city, that Nathan Blackfeather lived his quiet existence. Nathan was a man carved from hardship, his face weathered with lines that told stories of battles fought far from home. At 58, he carried himself with the rigid bearing of a soldier, though his shoulders had begun to stoop under the weight of years. His hair, once black as raven wings, was streaked with silver and tied back in a simple braid that spoke of his Lakota heritage. His jaw was square, marked by a faint scar that ran from his left ear to his chin, a souvenir from a roadside explosion during his second deployment in Iraq. That single event had shaped him more than any medal could. He had lost 2 comrades that day, brothers he could never bring back, and from then on, Nathan wore silence like a second skin. To strangers, he seemed stern and unapproachable, but to those few who broke through his walls, he revealed a man of quiet loyalty, one who carried grief in his heart yet found solace in small acts of kindness. At his side was Coda, his German shepherd, 6 years old, a creature of both strength and sensitivity. Coda's coat was a thick blend of sable and black, his amber eyes sharp yet warm when resting on his master. The dog had been gifted to Nathan by a fellow veteran who could no longer care for him, and since then the animal had become more than a companion. He was Nathan's shadow, his protector, and sometimes the only voice of comfort during restless nights. Coda was disciplined, alert to every sound, and prone to growl at things unseen, as though he carried instincts that reached beyond the human sense of danger. On this particular morning, the cold was especially bitter. Nathan had just returned from his routine walk with Coda when a knock sounded on his door, firm and deliberate. Opening it, Nathan found himself facing a man in a heavy wool overcoat. His name was Mr. Charles Thompson, a lawyer from the state capital. Thompson was in his mid-50s, tall but slightly overweight, with thinning blonde hair slicked back from a broad forehead. His blue eyes carried the sharpness of a man who had spent decades scrutinizing fine print, but his round face softened the severity, making him appear approachable despite his profession. He smelled faintly of cigar smoke, and the way he cleared his throat before speaking suggested a man more comfortable with documents than with direct conversation. "Mr. Blackfeather?" Thompson asked, his voice formal but not unkind. "That's me," Nathan replied, his tone flat but polite. "I apologize for the intrusion," the lawyer said, adjusting his coat against the draft from the hallway. "But I bring news concerning your family. Specifically, an inheritance left by a relative, Jasper Gray." Nathan frowned. "I don't know any Jasper Gray." Thompson opened his briefcase and withdrew several official-looking documents. He laid them on the small kitchen table, where the morning's coffee still steamed in a chipped mug. According to these records, Jasper Gray was your late mother's cousin, a reclusive man who owned a tract of land in the mountains. He passed away 6 weeks ago, and in his will, he named you the sole heir. Nathan raised a skeptical brow. He had grown up hearing little about his extended family. His mother, a stern woman of Lakota blood, had always avoided discussing distant relatives. She spoke, instead of survival, of keeping traditions alive in a world that sought to erase them. Jasper Gray was a name he had never heard, and yet here was a stranger telling him that this man had left him something. "What kind of land?" Nathan asked cautiously. "A lake, mostly," Thompson said. "Locals call it Hollow of Shadows, a parcel of about 30 acres, though much of it is swamp and timber. To be honest, most folks wouldn't see much value in it. Rumors of pollution, old mining waste, and other stories." "Other stories?" The lawyer shifted uncomfortably. "Superstitions, mostly. Whispers about disappearances, strange lights, accidents, mountain talk. But the deed is legitimate. The property is yours if you accept." As if sensing the tension in the room, Coda let out a low growl, ears pricked forward. His eyes locked on Thompson's briefcase, though there was nothing unusual about it. Nathan placed a calming hand on the dog's neck, but felt his own pulse quicken. It was rare for Coda to react so strongly without reason. "Why now?" Nathan asked quietly. "Because the estate must be settled," Thompson replied. "If you choose to reject the inheritance, the land will revert to the county. But if you accept, it is yours to do with as you please." Nathan leaned back, folding his arms across his chest. He thought of his small apartment, the unpaid bills stacked by the sink, the feeling of being rootless despite his military service. A man without family, without legacy. And now fate had handed him a piece of wilderness that no one else wanted. He wanted to refuse, to send the lawyer away and return to his quiet anonymity. But Coda suddenly barked, a sharp, insistent sound that echoed off the walls, startling both men. The German shepherd stood rigid, hackles raised, staring at the papers as if recognizing something Nathan could not. His bark turned into a howl, low and mournful, the kind that vibrated in the chest and carried with it an, ancient warning. Thompson blinked, unsettled. "Is he always like this?" "No," Nathan muttered, eyes narrowing. Coda had been trained to remain calm, disciplined even in chaos. For him to react this way was extraordinary. Nathan looked back at the papers, at the name of a relative he had never known, and felt a stirring deep inside, a mixture of unease and destiny. His instincts, honed on battlefields, whispered that this was no ordinary inheritance. Hollow of Shadows was calling to him, and for reasons beyond logic, he felt he could not ignore it. "Where do I sign?" Nathan asked at last. Thompson exhaled with relief, producing a pen. The documents were signed quickly, the legalities explained in precise detail. When the lawyer departed, Nathan stood by the window, watching snowflakes spiral down from the gray sky, and felt the weight of unseen eyes upon him. Coda pressed against his leg, ears still alert, gaze fixed toward the distant mountains where the hollow awaited. That night, as the city lights flickered against the frost, Nathan lay awake with memories of his past deployments blending with strange new thoughts. He remembered comrades who had trusted their instincts and lived, and others who had ignored them and died. Coda's reaction haunted him more than any clause in the will. The Hollow of Shadows was no ordinary stretch of land. Somewhere beneath its murky waters and decaying shacks lay secrets meant to remain buried. But destiny had chosen him, and whether he willed it or not, he was bound to uncover them. And so, Nathan Blackfeather, soldier turned recluse, with his faithful dog Coda by his side, prepared to leave behind the cold streets of Charleston and step into a mystery that would change their lives forever. The journey to Hollow of Shadows took Nathan and Coda 2 days by truck, the winter roads twisting like serpents through the Appalachian Mountains. The air grew colder with every mile, and the towns became smaller, the houses older, their windows clouded with the weight of generations who had seen both prosperity and ruin. By the time Nathan reached the dirt path that led to the lake, dusk was already bleeding across the sky, and the forest seemed to lean inward, as though guarding a secret. Hollow of Shadows was exactly as the lawyer had described, perhaps worse. The lake stretched wide, but its water was a stagnant black, reflecting the dull glow of the moon like liquid obsidian. Rotting wooden shacks leaned drunkenly along the shore, their roofs caved in, their walls marked with graffiti and rust. Barrels, eaten by time, lay half-submerged at the edges, and the air carried the stench of mildew and something faintly metallic, like old blood. Nathan stood still, his breath clouding in the icy air, and Coda pressed against his leg, his hackles rising. The German shepherd's eyes scanned the waterline, his ears twitching at sounds Nathan could not hear. Nathan had seen war zones, villages burned to ash, and cities reduced to rubble. But there was something different here, something older, less explainable. It was not destruction that haunted the hollow, but memory. They found an old cabin still standing near the northern ridge, half hidden under pines. Its timbers sagged, but the structure held, and Nathan decided it would serve as shelter for the night. He built a small fire in the stone hearth and laid his bedroll on the dusty floorboards. Outside, the wind howled, and with it came faint whispers, at first like the moaning of trees, but soon distinct enough that Nathan froze. He could swear he heard words, carried thin and hollow across the lake. Coda growled, deep and low, his body rigid. The dog padded to the window, teeth bared, staring into the blackness. Nathan took his rifle, an old hunting piece he always carried, and stepped to the door. He saw nothing but the restless shimmer of the lake. Still, the whispers seemed to echo inside his skull, not quite real, not quite imagined. With a grunt, he shut the door, forcing himself to dismiss it as tricks of the wind. Yet his soldier's instincts told him to stay alert. Sleep did not come easy. Every creak of the cabin seemed amplified, every gust of wind another voice. Sometime past midnight, Nathan's eyes snapped open as Coda barked sharply, then whined, pawing at the floorboards. The dog scratched furiously, nose pressed against a seam in the wood. Nathan lifted a lantern and knelt, brushing away dust. There, in a small hollow beneath the boards, was a metal box, rusted and scarred with age. It took force to pry it open. Inside lay several pages of parchment, brittle and yellow with time. Nathan lifted one carefully, his calloused fingers gentle despite their size. The handwriting was elegant, looping, yet hurried in places as though written under duress. He read the first lines aloud, his voice barely above a whisper. June 1883, the gold is cursed. Men have died for it, and more will follow. I hear them in the night, voices that are not my own. They want what was stolen. They will not rest. Nathan frowned, his scarred brow tightening. He turned the page, finding names, dates, and references to shipments. But the most chilling entry was near the end. They will kill to bury the secret. If you find this, know that the hollow is not what it seems. Trust no one. Coda whimpered, nudging the box as if urging Nathan to close it. Instead, Nathan leaned back, the flickering lantern casting shadows across his hard face. He had no patience for ghost stories, but he also knew fear when he saw it. Coda was not afraid of shadows. He was afraid of truth. At dawn, Nathan stepped outside to clear his mind. Frost clung to the grass, and mist hovered over the lake's surface like a living thing. He walked the shoreline, Coda trotting at his side, nose to the ground. That was when the dog suddenly stopped, tail stiff, and began digging at the damp earth near the water's edge. Nathan crouched to see what had caught his attention. The soil gave way easily, revealing another metal container, this one nearly disintegrated by rust. Inside was a fragment of leather binding, perhaps once a journal, though most of it had rotted. Only a few pages remained legible. They spoke of the Confederate gold, of betrayal among men sworn to guard it, and of 3 bodies buried somewhere near the hollow. The handwriting was different from the first set of papers, rougher, more hurried, suggesting another author entirely. Nathan felt the weight of history pressing down on him. This was no mere superstition. Something had indeed happened here, a conspiracy buried in mud and memory. The whispers of the night might have been the wind, but the documents in his hands were real. He considered leaving, packing his things and driving away, never to look back. But as he looked at Coda, the dog's eyes fixed on him with a steady, unwavering gaze, Nathan knew he could not. Soldiers did not run from mysteries. They uncovered them. That night, as the fire crackled in the cabin, Nathan read through the surviving fragments again, piecing together what little sense he could. The more he read, the more he realized. The hollow was not cursed by spirits, but by men. Men who had killed and buried their crimes, leaving only scraps of evidence behind. And if those crimes had been buried once, perhaps others still had reason to keep them hidden. The thought left him restless, his hand never far from his rifle. When he finally drifted to sleep, he dreamed of shadows moving across the lake, faceless figures dragging chains of gold into the depths. He awoke in a cold sweat, Coda's head resting on his chest as if to guard him even in slumber. The Hollow of Shadows was no ordinary inheritance. It was a graveyard of secrets, and Nathan Blackfeather had just unearthed the first bones. The next morning brought no warmth to Hollow of Shadows. The fog clung thick over the water, refusing to lift even as daylight broke. Nathan Blackfeather stood outside the cabin with Coda at his side, staring at the papers he had found. The words from the journals weighed heavily on him, hinting at betrayal, murder, and gold that had vanished into the earth. He knew he couldn't piece this puzzle together alone. If anyone could help decipher the past, it would be someone who lived among books and history, not battlefields and ghosts. With that thought, he packed the pages carefully into a weathered leather satchel, locked the cabin door, and climbed into his old pickup truck. Coda jumped into the passenger seat, ears alert, gaze fixed on the mist as though unwilling to turn his back on the hollow. The drive into town took nearly an hour. The road was narrow, hugging the mountain cliffs, with pines standing tall like silent guardians. Nathan kept his eyes sharp on the winding path, but his thoughts drifted uneasily to the warnings scrawled on the papers. His instincts, sharpened from years in combat, told him these were not harmless relics. Someone had hidden them for a reason. By late morning he reached the town of Willow Creek, a small settlement with a single main street where the grocery store, diner, and library all seemed stitched together like parts of the same memory. He parked in front of the library, a modest stone building with ivy climbing its outer walls. The sign above the door had faded, but the brass handle shone from decades of use. Inside, the air smelled of paper and dust, but also of lemon oil used to polish the wooden shelves. The woman at the front desk looked up from her work. Martha Green was in her 70s, tall and thin, with a posture that suggested both discipline and grace. Her white hair was tied neatly into a bun, but stray wisps framed her face, softening the sternness of her sharp cheekbones. Her skin bore the gentle creases of age, and her eyes, a pale blue, carried both wisdom and an unyielding strength. She wore a long gray cardigan over a navy dress, practical shoes, and reading glasses perched on the edge of her nose. Martha had been the librarian of Willow Creek for nearly 5 decades. She was known by locals as a keeper of stories, not just from the books that lined her shelves, but from the countless memories she carried of the town and its people. She had outlived her husband, who died in a mining accident, and raised 3 children who had long since moved to bigger cities. Loss had etched itself into her life, but she wore it not as a wound, rather as a reminder of resilience. "Good morning," she said, her voice warm but steady. She studied Nathan with curiosity. He was a stranger here, tall and broad-shouldered, his hair tied back in a braid, his face lined with scars of battles unknown to most. Coda walked close at his side, commanding attention with his powerful frame and amber eyes. "I don't believe I've seen you in town before." Nathan inclined his head respectfully. "Name's Nathan Blackfeather. I've come into possession of some documents I was hoping you might help me understand." "Old ones," Martha raised a brow. "Old documents are my specialty." Let me see. Nathan placed the satchel on the desk, unbuckled it, and spread the fragile pages gently across the polished wood. Martha adjusted her glasses and leaned closer, her pale blue eyes narrowing as she read. The elegant handwriting, the dates, and the references to shipments of gold made her pause. She flipped through each page slowly, occasionally glancing up at Nathan as though measuring his character. "These are very old," she said finally, "and very dangerous." Nathan frowned. "Dangerous?" Martha lowered her voice. "This handwriting belongs to Jasper Gray. He was a recluse who lived near Hollow of Shadows for most of his life. Locals thought him eccentric, even mad, but he was clever. If these pages are his, then they confirm what people around here have whispered for generations. Confederate gold was hidden in those hills, and men killed each other to keep it secret." Nathan's jaw tightened. "I thought as much." Martha's eyes softened, but her words remained heavy. "You should be careful, Mr. Blackfeather. This town has seen more than one man disappear chasing that legend. The Hollow isn't just cursed by ghost stories. People have died there, and not all of them in the distant past." Coda gave a low growl, as if echoing her warning. Martha looked at the dog and smiled faintly. "He knows what I mean. Animals sense danger before we do." Nathan gathered the papers back into the satchel. "I don't scare easily." Martha straightened, folding her hands on the desk. "Perhaps not. But courage and caution are not enemies, Mr. Blackfeather. Promise me you won't go digging too deep, too fast. There are families in this town who've been chasing that gold for generations. They won't take kindly to an outsider finding what they believe is theirs." Nathan studied her face, noting the sincerity in her eyes. "Why tell me this? You don't know me." "I knew your grandfather," Martha replied quietly. "He came through here once when I was a young girl." Strong man, proud. He spoke of honor, of keeping balance between past and present. "You look like him." The words struck Nathan harder than he expected. He nodded once, quietly. "Thank you." As he left the library, Martha's warning echoed in his mind. Outside, the wind had picked up, sending leaves skittering across the street. Nathan climbed into his truck, Coda leaping in after him, and started the engine. He glanced in the rear-view mirror and froze. A black pickup truck idled half a block away, its engine running, windows tinted too dark to see inside. Nathan narrowed his eyes. The vehicle pulled away slowly as his truck began to move. keeping distance but never out of sight. His instincts flared to life. This wasn't coincidence. Someone was watching, someone who knew he had the papers. Coda barked once, sharp and warning, and Nathan muttered under his breath, "Yeah, boy, I see them too." The Hollow had opened its secrets, and now others were circling, waiting for their chance to claim what lay hidden beneath the black waters. The black pickup had vanished by the time Nathan reached Hollow of Shadows again, but the unease it left lingered like smoke after fire. He parked near the cabin and let Coda leap from the truck, the German shepherd's paws sinking into damp earth as he sniffed the cold air. Nathan felt the silence pressing down heavier than before. The lake was still, but it seemed to watch him with a predator's patience. He adjusted the rifle slung across his back and moved down toward the shoreline, Coda scouting ahead with practiced caution. The ground was soft near the northern edge of the lake, the mud clinging to Nathan's boots. Coda stopped suddenly, his body stiff, tail rigid, and ears forward. He barked twice, sharp and commanding, then began pawing furiously at a patch of earth. Nathan knelt beside him and pushed back the muck with a stick. Beneath the wet soil, something metallic caught the light of the fading sun. It was the edge of a rectangular frame, corroded but unmistakably forged steel. Nathan's heart quickened. He brushed away more until the outline of what looked like a hatch appeared, half buried by time and mud. He was reaching for his knife to pry at the seam when a sound behind him froze his blood, the crack of branches under heavy boots. Instinct took over. He spun, rifle raised, just as three figures emerged from the trees. The first was a tall, broad man with a shaved head and a thick beard that covered most of his square jaw. His eyes were small and cold, his nose crooked from old breaks. He wore a heavy leather jacket over flannel and carried a shotgun held casually but ready. The second was leaner, younger, with dark hair cropped short and restless eyes that darted about like a cornered animal. A scar slashed across his cheek, giving his otherwise boyish face a hardened edge. He held a pistol, though his grip betrayed inexperience. The third was older, wiry, with a thin gray mustache and sunken cheeks. His shoulders stooped, but his hands were steady as he gripped a long hunting knife. Nathan recognized the look immediately. Men who had done dirty work before, men who didn't show themselves unless they intended violence. Coda growled low, teeth bared, the fur along his spine bristling. The bearded man spoke first, his voice gravelly. "That's far enough, stranger. You're poking your nose where it doesn't belong." Nathan kept his rifle trained but didn't fire. "I could say the same to you." The younger man with the scar laughed bitterly. "You don't get it, do you? This place isn't yours. It belongs to the Cromwells." The name hit Nathan like a stone. He had heard Martha speak it in whispers at the library. Cromwell, the family with blood tangled deep in the legend of the Confederate gold. Nathan's voice was steady, but his eyes narrowed. "Cromwells have been dead and buried for a long time." "Not all of us," the older man said, stepping forward, knife glinting in the dim light. His face was lined, his skin weather-beaten, but his eyes burned with fanatic conviction. "We've kept the claim alive. Jasper Gray thought he could hide it, but he was a fool. And if you think you can take what's ours, you'll end up the same way he did." The bearded leader lifted his shotgun slightly. "Walk away, Blackfeather. Leave the Hollow. Forget what you saw. Nathan didn't move. Years of combat had trained him not to show fear." His finger hovered near the trigger, but he knew the odds. 3 guns on him, no cover, and Coda at risk. The standoff stretched like wire ready to snap. Then Coda moved. With a sudden fierce snarl, the German shepherd lunged at the scarred youth. The pistol fired wildly, the shot cracking into the trees, but Koda's weight slammed the man to the ground. The bearded leader swung his shotgun toward the dog, but Nathan acted first. He dropped low, rolling into the mud, and fired a single round into the dirt near the man's boots. The spray of soil startled him just enough for Nathan to close the gap and smash the rifle stock across his wrist. The shotgun clattered to the ground. The older man lunged with his knife, his movements sharp despite his age. Nathan twisted, blocking with his arm, the blade grazing his jacket and tearing through fabric but missing flesh. He countered with a heavy punch to the man's jaw, sending him stumbling back into the reeds. Koda held the scarred youth pinned, teeth inches from his throat. The man froze, eyes wide, pistol useless now as Nathan trained his rifle back on the group. "Pick up that gun," Nathan growled at the leader, "and it'll be the last thing you ever do." The bearded man spat blood into the mud, glaring, but didn't reach for the weapon. "This isn't over," the older man hissed, retrieving his knife. "You can't fight the Cromwells. We own this land. We own the Hollow. And you're already cursed." With that, he motioned for the others to retreat. The three melted back into the trees, their threats lingering in the cold air like smoke. Nathan exhaled slowly, lowering his rifle. Koda released the youth, who scrambled to his feet and followed the others, clutching his torn jacket. The silence returned, broken only by Koda's panting. Nathan wiped mud from his face, his chest heaving. He looked back at the steel frame buried in the ground, the hidden hatch that had nearly cost him his life. The Cromwells had been watching all along. Jasper Gray hadn't died by chance. He had been silenced. And now Nathan understood the whispers, the fear, the blood that stained the Hollow. It wasn't just cursed by ghosts. It was cursed by men. The night after the attack by the Cromwells, Nathan sat in the cabin, his body sore, his mind restless. Koda lay at his feet, the German shepherd's chest rising and falling with shallow breaths, ears twitching at every sound. Nathan stared at the steel hatch he had uncovered earlier that day. It remained half buried, mocking him like a door to another world. He knew he couldn't open it alone, not while the Cromwells lurked in the shadows. He needed knowledge, context, something more than a soldier's instincts. The following morning fog clung to the Hollow again, thick and unmoving, as Nathan drove into Willow Creek. He intended to speak to Martha once more, but fate had other plans. At the diner across from the library, a stranger was waiting. The man sat alone in a booth by the window, a pile of leather-bound notebooks spread before him. He was in his early 60s, tall and lean, with a frame that carried itself upright despite age. His hair was silver, combed neatly back, and his face bore the kind of sharp lines that gave him a permanent look of thoughtfulness. A trimmed beard, streaked with white, covered his jaw and chin, lending him a scholarly yet rugged air. His clothes were simple but neat, a tweed jacket over a dark vest, polished boots, and a watch chain that gleamed when he moved his hand. His eyes, however, were the most striking feature. Piercing hazel, intelligent, but also weary, as if burdened by secrets. When Nathan entered, the man's gaze shifted immediately to him, studying him with recognition. "You must be Nathan Blackfeather," the man said, his voice deep, calm, with a trace of old-world eloquence. "I've been waiting." Nathan stiffened, resting a hand on Koda's collar. "And you are?" The man gave a polite nod. "Professor Ray Dalton. I specialize in American history, specifically the Civil War and its lost shipments. Jasper Gray wrote to me several years ago. He believed I was the only one who could help protect what he found." The name hit Nathan like a jolt. Jasper again, the phantom relative who had left him this cursed inheritance. He slid into the booth across from Dalton, his eyes narrowing. "And how exactly did you know I'd be here?" Dalton's lips curved faintly. "Martha told me." "She thought you might need guidance." "She wasn't wrong." He tapped the stack of notebooks. "I've been studying Jasper's letters and journals for years. The Cromwells have pursued this treasure for generations, and Jasper was terrified they'd kill for it. He wanted someone to continue his work if anything happened to him. It seems his instincts were right." Coda growled softly, nose twitching as he sniffed Dalton's boots, then relaxed, as if giving silent approval. Nathan noticed. His dog rarely accepted strangers so easily. Dalton leaned forward, his voice lowering. "The hatch you found near the North Shore. It isn't just some random debris. It's the cover to a storage chamber. Jasper's notes mention it explicitly. The Confederate gold, if it ever made it here, would be beneath that lake." Hidden in compartments meant to outlast generations, Nathan's scarred brow furrowed. "And how do you know all this isn't just another ghost story to get me killed?" Dalton's expression hardened slightly. "Because I've risked my life more times than I care to admit following this trail. I've spoken with descendants of soldiers who vanished in 1883. I've uncovered records of bribes, murders, and missing shipments. And Jasper, your uncle, whether you claim him or not, died days after sending me his final note. That is not coincidence." The Cromwells silenced him. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the clatter of dishes in the diner. Nathan studied Dalton closely. There was something genuine in the man's tone, though his words carried the weight of obsession. "What do you want from me?" Nathan asked. Dalton's hazel eyes softened, though the determination in them never faded. "Partnership. You have the land, the access, I have the knowledge, the research. Together we might have a chance to uncover the truth before the Cromwells bury it forever, and us along with it." Nathan leaned back, crossing his arms. "I've been a soldier long enough to know partnerships often end in betrayal. What makes you different?" Dalton's gaze grew distant, the lines around his mouth deepening. "Because I already lost everything chasing this. My wife left years ago, tired of living with a man haunted by the past. My son, he doesn't speak to me anymore. He thinks I cared more about dead men than my own family." "He's not wrong," Dalton exhaled slowly, his voice heavy with regret. "This is all I have left, Nathan. If I don't see it through, then my life was wasted. And Jasper trusted me. That has to mean something." For the first time, Nathan saw not just a historian, but a man fractured by loss, clinging to purpose as if it were a lifeline. He recognized the look. He had seen it in mirrors after Iraq, when survival itself felt meaningless without something to fight for. Coda whined softly, laying his head on Nathan's leg as if urging him to decide. Nathan scratched behind the dog's ears, his scarred face unreadable. Finally, he said, "Fine. We work together. But if you betray me, I'll know before you finish the thought." Dalton gave a wry smile. "Fair enough." They left the diner together, the winter sun struggling to break through the clouds. As they walked toward Nathan's truck, Dalton stopped abruptly, scanning the street. Nathan followed his gaze and saw it, the same black pickup idling a block away. Dalton's jaw clenched. The Cromwells. "They've been watching me too." Nathan's grip tightened on his rifle case. "Then we move fast." Before they do, the two men climbed into the truck, Coda leaping into the back seat with a sharp bark, as the engine roared, to life. Nathan felt the uneasy stirrings of something larger than himself. He had started this journey alone, but now he carried an ally who might know more than he dared to ask. Whether that was salvation or another trap, only time would tell. By the following evening, The hollow had grown darker than usual, its mist curling low across the lake like smoke from an unseen fire. Nathan Blackfeather stood knee-deep in the icy water with Coda beside him, the German shepherd's paws splashing softly as he scanned the shoreline. Behind them, Professor Ray Dalton worked with methodical care, lowering a battered metal detector into the water. Dalton had insisted they use his equipment, a collection of tools he had carried for decades, patched and repaired as many times as his notebooks had been rewritten. The device gave off steady beeps, low at first, then sharper as Dalton swept it along the bottom. His hazel eyes lit with excitement. "Here," he whispered. "Strong readings." Something heavy, metallic, and not natural. It's exactly where Jasper's notes said it would be. Nathan squinted at the lake, his scar catching the glow of the lantern perched on the shore. "That doesn't mean it's gold. Could be an old mine shaft door. Could be a coffin." Dalton gave a humorless smile. "Either way, it's worth finding out." Coda whined softly, pressing closer to Nathan's side. The dog's instincts were sharp tonight, his amber eyes refusing to leave the tree line across the water. Nathan trusted that unease more than any machine. He had learned long ago that silence was rarely a friend in hostile territory. Hours passed as they marked 3 different locations in the lake, each yielding strong signals. By the time they packed the equipment and returned to the cabin, night had fully descended. The air was bitter, their breath forming clouds that vanished into the dark. Nathan had just locked the door when Coda barked sharply, his voice filled with urgency. The German shepherd lunged to the window, teeth bared, a low growl rumbling in his throat. Nathan moved fast. He extinguished the lantern, plunging the cabin into shadow. Outside, the crunch of boots and the faint click of weapons broke the stillness. Then came voices, low, menacing. "Spread out. No one leaves alive." Dalton froze, clutching his notebooks to his chest. His face paled, but his eyes hardened with resolve. Nathan's hand tightened on his rifle as shadows moved through the mist outside. At least 6 men. Maybe more. Their movements were disciplined, not like the Cromwells from before. These were hired guns, mercenaries. The door splintered before Nathan could react, kicked open by a man in combat gear. He was broad-shouldered, with a shaved scalp and a jagged scar running down the left side of his face. A tactical vest stretched across his chest, bristling with magazines and knives. His jaw was square, his teeth bared in a grin that never touched his cold eyes. He held a semi-automatic rifle, the barrel already sweeping the room. Behind him came others. One, a tall man with long blonde hair tied into a ponytail, his face lean and angular, eyes restless like a predator on the hunt. Another was shorter, thick-bodied, with tattoos crawling up his neck and across his knuckles, his movements quick and aggressive. Nathan fired first, not to kill, but to drive them back. The shot exploded through the doorway, shattering a lantern one of the men carried. Sparks lit the mist as shouting filled the hollow. Coda launched forward, teeth sinking into the arm of the tattooed mercenary. The man screamed, dropping his weapon as the dog dragged him into the mud outside. Dalton, surprisingly calm under fire, darted to the corner where he had set up a crude defensive line. Earlier that day, while Nathan scouted the lake, the professor had buried a set of small charges he called contingencies. He now clicked a detonator. The ground outside erupted with a roar, soil and branches flying into the air, throwing 2 men back into the reeds. "Move!" Nathan shouted, pulling Dalton toward the back of the cabin. They burst through a rear door just as bullets tore through the wooden walls, splinters spraying like knives. The night erupted with gunfire, echoing across the lake like thunder. The chase began. Nathan sprinted along the shoreline, Coda bounding ahead, his barks sharp and commanding. Dalton followed, clutching his satchel, his breath ragged but his determination unwavering. Behind them, shouts rang out. "Don't let them reach the trees!" Muzzle flashes lit the dark, bullets tearing into tree trunks, sending bark flying. Nathan dove behind a fallen log, returning fire with steady precision. His scarred face was grim, eyes narrowed, every muscle moving with the cold efficiency of a soldier who had lived through too many ambushes. Dalton crouched beside him, trembling but steady enough to reload Nathan's spare magazines when asked. "They'll kill us for those notes," he hissed. "They'll kill us anyway," Nathan replied flatly. "Stay low." One of the mercenaries broke cover, the blond man with the ponytail. He charged forward, rifle raised. Nathan squeezed the trigger, sending him sprawling into the mud. Another man circled from the right, but Coda intercepted, slamming into him with the force of a cannonball. The mercenary fell screaming as the dog tore into his shoulder. The battle raged through the trees, a deadly dance of fire and shadows. Nathan fought with grim focus, each shot deliberate, each movement controlled. Dalton, though no fighter, showed courage in his own way, marking their path with small charges that slowed their pursuers. Finally, a lull. The gunfire quieted, leaving only the hiss of the lake and the labored breaths of survivors. Nathan crouched in the brush, rifle still aimed, while Dalton clutched the satchel as if it were his last tether to life. Coda limped slightly, his fur matted with blood from a graze along his flank, but his eyes still burned with fierce loyalty. From the distance came a voice, deep and commanding, the scarred leader who had first entered the cabin. "This isn't over, Blackfeather. The Cromwells don't forgive. You're already dead men walking." Nathan spat into the mud, his jaw tight. "Come and finish it, then." But the mercenaries didn't return. Instead, their voices faded into the mist, retreating into the hollow's shadows. Silence reclaimed the night, heavy and uneasy. Nathan touched Coda's head, feeling the dog's warmth beneath his hand. "Good boy." "We're still standing," Dalton, pale and shaking, nodded. "But for how long?" As the three of them sat in the darkness, listening to the hollow breathe, Nathan understood one truth with bitter clarity. The battle had only begun. The hollow was eerily silent the next morning, as if the night's violence had drained the place of even its whispers. Nathan Blackfeather stood on the shore with Coda at his side, the German shepherd moving stiffly but alert despite the graze wound he carried. Ray Dalton knelt nearby, his hands steady as he unpacked waterproof containers, ropes, and the salvaging gear he had collected over years of obsession. The old professor's face, lined with fatigue, seemed brighter now, his hazel eyes carrying the spark of purpose that had long eluded him. They weren't alone for long. The crunch of gravel announced the arrival of Sheriff Bradley, a man in his late 50s with a broad chest and a weathered face that bore both kindness and authority. His hair was peppered with gray, trimmed short, and a neatly kept mustache framed his mouth. Bradley carried himself like a man used to confrontation, steady in his stride, cautious in his speech. A lifelong lawman, he had seen the worst men could do, and still believed in duty. He stepped from his cruiser, his boots sinking into the mud, eyes sweeping the scene with measured calm. "I got your call, Blackfeather," Bradley said, his voice deep and gravelly. "Heard there was trouble last night. Some of the Cromwell boys ended up in our cells, armed to the teeth. Care to explain why they thought this lake was worth dying over?" Nathan handed him a bundle of pages from Jasper's journals. Bradley read in silence for several minutes, his brow furrowing deeper with each line. Finally, he exhaled. "So it's true. Confederate gold." Jasper Gray wasn't mad after all. He shook his head. "Lord, if this gets out, half the county will be crawling over these woods with shovels and rifles." That's why we need to move fast, Dalton said. His voice carried both urgency and weariness. The Cromwells won't stop, not even after last night. If we can bring what's under there to the surface and secure it, we might just end this once and for all. Bradley closed the journal and looked at Nathan. And you're sure you want to be part of this? You didn't ask for it. Nathan's scarred face hardened, but his voice was calm. I didn't ask for Iraq either. Some things you don't get to choose. Jasper left this for me, and I'm not running from it. Coda barked once, as if agreeing. By midday, they had assembled what they needed: diving suits, lines, and lifting bags. Dalton explained the plan with precision, his voice trembling only slightly. We descend to the hatch, pry it open, and attach the bags to whatever is inside. With luck, it will rise intact. If not, we salvage piece by piece. Either way, we document everything. The water was icy, biting into their bones even through the suits. Nathan led the descent, his movements sure and deliberate, while Dalton followed, clutching a waterproof lamp. The lakebed was a world of shadows, silt rising in thick clouds with every step. Coda waited on shore with Bradley, barking anxiously at the ripples above. Then Nathan's hand struck metal. The hatch loomed before them, larger than he had imagined, its iron face scarred by decades underwater. Together they forced it open, the hinges groaning like the moan of some ancient beast. Inside lay a large chest, its surface crusted with rust but unmistakably intact. They secured it with straps and signaled to the surface. Slowly, with the hiss of airbags inflating, the chest began to rise, breaking through the water with a spray of foam. On shore, Bradley and Coda hauled it onto the bank. The sheriff's eyes widened as Nathan and Dalton emerged, dripping from the lake. The chest was heavy, but the lock gave way under Nathan's knife. The lid creaked open. Inside lay stacks of gold bars, dull with age yet gleaming beneath the grime. Alongside them were leather-bound ledgers, sealed envelopes, and documents stamped with Confederate insignia. Dalton's breath caught. This is it. Not just treasure, records. Proof of what Jasper feared. Nathan lifted one of the ledgers, flipping through pages filled with names, numbers, and coded entries. Dalton translated quickly, his voice breaking with excitement. They planned to use this gold to finance groups long after the war, to keep alive the dream of division. Jasper must have realized and hidden it here to stop them. Sheriff Bradley's face darkened. If the Cromwells had gotten this, they'd have used it to stir up the same poison all over again. Maybe they still will. If word spreads, Nathan closed the ledger with a firm hand. Then we don't let it spread. This isn't just money, it's a weapon, and weapons belong in the right hands. By evening, the decision was made. Part of the treasure would go to the state to be preserved in museums, its story told truthfully rather than twisted. Another portion would fund scholarships for Native children, a legacy Jasper had never lived to see, but one Nathan felt was right. The remainder, Bradley promised, would be locked beyond the reach of greed. As the sun set behind the mountains, its rays striking the lake with a golden glow, Nathan stood with Coda at his side, Ray Dalton and Sheriff Bradley behind him. Hollow of Shadows no longer felt cursed. The voices in the wind were gone, replaced by the quiet strength of history acknowledged and justice restored. Nathan realized then that the true treasure was not the gold, but the courage to face the past and transform it into hope for the future. Sometimes treasures are not made of gold, but of faith, courage, and the unseen hand of God. Nathan believed he was cursed when the Hollow of Shadows was placed in his care. But in truth, it was a blessing. A chance to turn fear into justice and darkness into light. Just as Jasper once hid the gold to stop evil, we too are called to protect what is good and pure in our daily lives. Miracles still happen, not always in grand displays, but in the quiet strength God gives us to face trials, to rise when the world wants to break us, and to find hope where others see only despair. May the same Lord who guided Nathan through the shadows guide you in your journey. Protect your family and shine light into your struggles. If this story touched you, share it with others, leave your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. May God bless you and keep you always.